So speaking of trying to get us killed, Marco Rubio looks like he's trying to get some Americans killed. He's clearly trying to instigate a regime change in Venezuela, which very well might mean American troops going into Venezuela and fighting for a cause that we really have no business being involved in. I dare you to go look at his Twitter account because it's pretty alarming. This guy is tweeting. He's on a tear. He's on a complete tear. He will not shut up about Venezuela and Maduro. But last night, he actually tweeted a photo that was so absolutely disgusting and disturbing. First, what he did was he tweeted, "Devastating headlines around the world today for the hashtag Maduro crime family. Their international isolation will grow. The roots for evading sanctions will shrink. And the willingness of many nations to support stronger multilateral actions to dislodge them have increased dramatically." Okay, so he's clearly talking about Venezuela and Maduro and what is going on down there. And right now, what is going on down there is very, very complicated. But really, it stems from a bunch of capitalists wanting to make a bunch of money off of the oil reserves of Venezuela. And we're wanting to help them do that. That's really what it ultimately comes down to. But before, I'll talk more about that here in depth. I first want to show you this other tweet, the follow-up tweet that was so disgusting from Marco Rubio. So after he says, hashtag Maduro crime family and talks about how, the things that he just disparaging them, he then tweets this photograph, this picture of Gaddafi, laughing, smiling, looking like he's having a great time on the left, and on the right, I can't look at that picture, guys. That is Gaddafi being murdered, which he was sodomized with a bayonet to death. So it's not good. It's a very gory and disgusting photograph. He didn't have any caption on that picture, but the message was very, very clear. He, especially considering the tweet right after that, was once again about the hashtag Maduro crime family in Venezuela. That photograph was clearly a threat to Maduro. It was, this is what happened in Libya, and this is what's going to happen to you. Really, really disgusting. And Marco Rubio has continued on, tweet after tweet after tweet. He says, growing body of video and photographic evidence of the crimes committed yesterday by hashtag Maduro crime family in Venezuela. He goes on to say, he's retweeting the Department of State that says Nicolas Maduro and his oppressive regime turned the arrival of life-saving aid for Venezuelans into a clash of violence. He then, it's just, go to his Twitter account, and it's at Marco Rubio, and look at all these tweets. I mean, it's like 20 tweets of just Venezuela, and he won't shut up about this. So what is going on in Venezuela? Well, really, long story short, is that Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, the largest known oil reserves in the world, more than Saudi Arabia. And they were privatized for a long time, and rich people were making a lot of money, and the nation was becoming poorer and poorer. The poor stayed poor and the rich got rich, and off of a resource that belongs to the country, really. It's part of the country. So Chavez, when he came into power, he wanted to help the people, the poor people, especially the indigenous people in Venezuela. And he decided to socialize the oil reserves, basically make sure that the profits went to the people. That's what he was trying to do. He didn't want the wealthy class to just continue making all of the oil money. He wanted that money because the oil reserves were in Venezuela, in the country, and should belong to the people that are citizens of that country. He wanted the money to go to them. So he instead socialized it, and that caused a huge problem, of course, with the wealthy class, right? The wealthy class, of course, pushed back because all of a sudden their resource, what kept them in power, what kept them rich, was being taken away from them. They wanted to continue on the way that they were. I mean, why wouldn't they, right? They were rolling in the dough. So they, of course, were extremely upset. They, of course, were going to give resistance. You're going to get that. The problem is that the United States then jumped in to help because we have a bunch of capitalists here who also want to make a boatload of money, even if it means that people stay poor. So it doesn't matter. Who cares about the little guy? Let's just go and take all the money for ourselves. So we helped in the way we did it was we put a bunch of sanctions on them. We made it very, very difficult for them to get loans in order to build the infrastructure needed for them to take advantage of their oil reserves. We prohibited other nations from buying from them. We just did a lot of things in order to try to cause them economic harm. And we did this for years and years. And Chavez died, and then Maduro took over, and Maduro was continuing on the work of Chavez, which was they're fighting tooth and nail to hold on to their national resource, for it not to be reprivatized so that the rich can just make a boatload of money and the poor and the people in Venezuela get no benefit from the natural resource in their own country. So Maduro has been fighting tooth and nail in order to keep that. Now, there is a resistance that's going on against him, yes, because those rich people who were making all the money off of it, and the rich people who stand to make more money off of it if it does get reprivatized, they have been propagandizing, and they have been trying to get people riled up. Of course, the way they do it is they spread rumors, they exaggerate things, they tell people that that the reason their lives are bad is because these men have come in and tried to, and socialism, and which really, what they're doing is they're just they're spewing lies into the minds of these people in order to get them to rise up against the government, against their own best interests, to help the rich people get wealthier. And unfortunately, our country has been helping in this effort because we want access to those oil reserves. We want our private companies to go in there with the infrastructure and take advantage and tap into those resources. So we've got the big American companies that can go in there and extract the oil. And we've got the ability to do all of that. So that's what that's the kind of the end game. There's a lot more to it, but, I don't have all day to explain it. So I'm sure we'll be talking more about this as the show goes on in the next days and weeks and months. But so what's gone on now is that we found this guy, Guaido. Well, actually, he's the assembly leader. So he's basically equivalent to like the Nancy Pelosi of Venezuela, and because he's the leader of the assembly. And in Venezuela, the constitutional law is if the president becomes incapacitated. So here in this country, it goes to the vice president, but over there it goes to like the speaker of the House, which is their national assembly leader. And this guy is very close to a bunch of capitalists in the United States. He went to school here in the United States, and he became the leader of the assembly. It was a very and kind of has been staging a coup down in Venezuela, saying that the president is incapacitated, which he is not, and trying to overthrow him in a way by swearing himself in as president. And then he gets backed by all of the, of course, capitalists around the world and, the Americans. And there's a lot that goes into this, like the petrodollar. And it's really, really complex. And we will get into all of that. But essentially what's going on down there is there's now a resistance at the border. There's been some humanitarian aid that has been offered to the Venezuelan people. And Maduro and his government have been blocking it because they feel like the humanitarian aid is actually a Trojan horse for the regime change. And they're very, very aware of the United States and the regime change efforts, and they're pretty suspicious that that's what that humanitarian aid is for. So it's getting ugly, and we don't really know who's doing what down at the border. You have to be very suspicious because you know that there's all of these wealthy people, and you know that there's the U.S. government and all these wealthy people who are trying to affect the regime change. So it's really hard to trust the media and the reporting that's going on down there at the border. It's really, really hard to trust it. We just don't really know who's really doing what. I mean, all of the reports right now are saying that it's Maduro and it's his troops, and he's the one who's firing on these people, and there have been some loss of life, and it's all Maduro's fault. And honestly, I would look at all of that very suspiciously just because there's a huge agenda in this whole thing. The agenda is the rich people want to come in and have access to that oil reserve. That's what they're wanting. So they're creating chaos. They're painting a narrative that's most likely inaccurate. And they are, it's just really, can you trust that? Can you trust the people who are wanting something? And then they're sitting there claiming, oh, no, this is just for humanitarian reasons. This is what this is for. And really, it's all to paint Maduro as a monster and to justify the marching in and taking of the oil. So I would be really, really suspicious of anything that I'm reading in regards to Venezuela. It is such a complicated issue, and I know I didn't do the best job in explaining it right here, right now, but we'll continue going on with it. My biggest point on this is that Marco Rubio is a dangerous man who's tweeting dangerous things, and he's trying to rally up his own base in order to get his base to say, yeah, we need to go in there and do something. And I would like to know who pays Marco Rubio. I would like to know where he's getting his money. Does he get a bunch of oil money? Is he getting a bunch of dirty oil money? That's what I would like to know. Because it is really strange for him to just go on and on and on and on and to tweet that brutal, gruesome photograph as a threat clearly to Maduro. But this is it's very complex. I'm sure Maduro is doing some stuff that is, I'm sure that there is some stuff going on both sides because it's a resistance. It's, these things, nobody's ever clean-handed necessarily. But I think what we need to do is get really realistic about why they're going down, why people want access to this oil, why they're demonizing the socialism aspect, which has nothing to do with the collapse of Venezuela. And that's another topic we'll get into. Venezuela is a complicated issue, but socialism has nothing to do with it. You can have extremely successful socialist countries and successful capitalist countries with regulation, and you could have failing socialist nations and failing capitalist nations. I mean, that has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with really the sanctions that were put on them, the tariffs, and just basically bullying them and making it really difficult for them to monetize the resource that they have, the one real big resource that they have. We have not allowed them to make any money off of it. So once they socialized it, we said, all right, well, if you're going to socialize it, we're just going to make sure no one can even buy it. So there you go. You're not going to get any profits from it. Ha, ha, ha. That's what's going on in Venezuela. It's sickening that our politicians are supporting this. It makes my stomach churn. Okay. I know I just did a hack job on that. I did not explain that very well, but hey, you know what? Tomorrow's another day, and hopefully I'll do better tomorrow with that as we dive more and deeper into Venezuela. And if you've got any insight and you want to email me something I can read to make that a little bit more succinct on air, that would be great. You can go to my website, KimIverson.com, and email me your thoughts or your questions. That would be fantastic. All right, so we're going to move on here. Lobbyists are trying to kill Medicare for all, and you will not believe who they hired to do it.